My neighbor called me right before I left for work and said, "Don't get into your car." At first, I thought he was being dramatic, but when I opened the door and saw what was waiting underneath it, my legs almost gave out. Before I take you deeper into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Rachel Monroe, and that morning started like any other. I woke up early, brewed my usual cup of coffee, and packed my lunch for school. Being a teacher, my mornings are always busy, but I enjoy the routine. It makes me feel grounded, safe, and ready to take on the day. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where people knew each other by name. My house was small but cozy, and I shared it with my younger brother, Ethan. He was 28, a mechanic, and often teased me for being overly cautious. "You always triple-check the locks, Rachel," he would say with a grin. Our mother, Diane, called me almost every morning, even after I moved out years ago. She was a nurse who had raised us alone after our father passed, and checking in was her way of making sure we were okay. I used to roll my eyes at her calls, but deep down, I appreciated them. That morning felt no different from any other. Ethan was half asleep on the couch, scrolling his phone. The sun was just beginning to brighten the street outside, and everything seemed calm. I grabbed my bag, slipped my keys into my hand, and felt ready to leave. I had no idea that a phone call from my neighbor was about to stop me in my tracks and change the way I looked at safety forever. I was about to step outside when my phone rang. At first, I thought it was Mom, calling for her usual morning check-in. But when I looked at the screen, I saw the name of my neighbor, Mr. Allen. That was unusual. He almost never called unless something was wrong. I answered with a polite, "Good morning, Mr. Allen," expecting maybe a question about his mail or yard work. Instead, his voice came through the line, sharp and urgent. "Rachel, don't get into your car." I froze by the door, keys dangling from my fingers. "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" His voice grew firmer. "I mean it. Don't open the door. Don't walk toward your car. Just stay inside." My first instinct was to laugh it off. "Mr. Allen, I'm late for work. Did you see a raccoon under there or something?" I tried to keep my tone light, but something about his words unsettled me. He didn't sound like a man warning me about an animal. He sounded deadly serious. "Rachel, listen to me," he said, lowering his voice. "I've seen something, and I don't want you anywhere near that car until the police are here." I pulled the curtain back just slightly and peeked at the driveway. My little silver sedan sat there, exactly where I'd left it the night before. From this angle, it looked perfectly fine, sunlight bouncing off the windshield. No dents, no broken glass. Nothing seemed unusual. "It looks fine to me," I said, my voice uneven. Behind me, Ethan stretched on the couch, half awake. "What's going on?" he mumbled. I muted the call for a second and whispered, "Mr. Allen's telling me not to get in my car. Says he saw something." Ethan groaned and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "He's probably overreacting. The guy's a retired firefighter. He treats everything like a 5-alarm emergency. You're going to be late if you keep listening to him." But when I unmuted the phone, Mr. Allen's words made my stomach clench tighter. "Rachel, please. I don't care if you think I'm paranoid. Don't move until someone checks. I can see your car from my porch, and something's wrong underneath it. Just trust me." The firmness in his voice silenced my protests. My heart began to race, but my logical side pushed back. If something's wrong, why haven't I noticed it? I drove it yesterday with no issues. "That doesn't matter," he shot back. "You're not hearing me. Just stay put. I'm already calling it in." I glanced back at Ethan. He rolled his eyes, muttering, "Maybe it's just a cat. He freaks out over everything." But even as he said it, I could tell he was starting to sense this wasn't just a neighbor being nosy. My body felt split in two. Part of me wanted to shrug it off, walk outside, and prove there was nothing there. But the other part of me, the part listening to the urgency in Mr. Allen's voice, told me not to risk it. I tightened my grip on the keys and asked him, "What exactly did you see?" There was a long pause, like he was carefully choosing his words. "Something metal. Something that doesn't belong under a car. That's all I'm saying, until the police arrive." That was enough to make me back away from the window. I turned to Ethan and whispered, "He says it's something metal under the car." Ethan stood now, more awake, his playful smirk gone. "That's weird. You don't think—" He stopped himself, his face turning serious. The atmosphere in the room changed. The cheerful morning light coming through the curtains suddenly felt harsh, like it was exposing a danger I couldn't see yet. Every second dragged, filled with the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. I whispered into the phone, "Mr. Allen, are you sure about this? I don't want to call the police over nothing." His voice broke through, calm but firm. "I wouldn't have called you if I wasn't sure. Do not step outside." I hung up, my hands trembling. Ethan and I stood in silence, staring at each other. It was such a strange moment, our safe little neighborhood, our quiet morning, now shadowed by the possibility of something sinister waiting just outside the door. I paced the living room, torn between disbelief and dread. If Mr. Allen was wrong, I'd waste time and look foolish. But if he was right, ignoring him could cost me something far more than embarrassment. Finally, I stopped at the window again, looking at my car sitting so innocently in the driveway. On the surface, it was just another morning, but in my gut, I knew everything had changed the moment that phone rang. Something was wrong, and I was about to find out exactly what it was. Ethan tried to laugh the tension away, but even he couldn't ignore how unsettled I looked. I stood by the window, staring at the car as if my eyes could pierce through the shadows underneath it. It looked so normal. That's what bothered me most. How could something dangerous be hiding in plain sight? Finally, I took a deep breath and said, "I have to see for myself." Ethan frowned. "Rachel, if Allen is right, and there's actually something under there, what are you going to do? You can't just go poking around." "I won't touch it," I said quickly. "I'll just look. I need to know if I'm imagining this, or if he really saw something." He muttered under his breath, but grabbed his phone and followed me to the door. I opened it slowly, the morning air cool against my skin. Usually, stepping outside on a weekday felt refreshing, a sign of routine. That morning, though, even the sound of birds chirping felt out of place. Mr. Allen was already on his porch across the street, pacing, his eyes fixed on my driveway. The moment he saw me step out, he raised his hands and shouted, "Stay back! Don't get too close." I froze. The keys clenched so tightly in my hand they dug into my skin. My neighbor had always been protective, but this was something different. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He looked like a man watching a fire about to spread. Ethan leaned close to me and whispered, "Maybe we should wait for the cops. He's dead serious." But curiosity and dread pulled me forward. I couldn't stop myself. I took a few steps toward the car, my legs heavy, my pulse racing in my throat. Each step felt louder than it should. Like the entire neighborhood could hear me walking. When I reached the edge of the driveway, I crouched down carefully, my knees shaking as I bent lower to see beneath the car. At first, the shadows played tricks on me. My eyes darted over the dark shapes, the tires, the underside of the frame, a few stray leaves that had blown in overnight. Nothing seemed unusual. Then my gaze caught it. It was small, metallic, and strapped tight against the undercarriage near the driver's side. Wires extended from a box-like shape, thin and dark, blending against the shadows. My breath caught in my chest. It wasn't a random piece of debris. It wasn't a toy or trash. It was placed there deliberately. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Look." He crouched beside me, squinting. For a moment, I thought he might dismiss it, tell me it was just part of the car, but his face changed instantly, the color draining. "Rachel, that's not supposed to be there." I stumbled back onto the grass, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped my keys. My legs felt weak, like they might collapse under me. The reality hit like a wave. If I had gotten into that car and started it, I might not have survived the morning. Mr. Allen shouted again from across the street. "Get away from it, both of you, now." His voice cracked with urgency. Ethan grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward the house. My vision blurred for a moment as my heart pounded against my ribs. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. Back on the porch, I gasped for air, clutching the railing like it was the only thing holding me steady. Ethan was pale, his jaw tight. "That's some kind of device," he muttered, shaking his head. It's wired. I don't know what, but it's not right. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. My voice broke as I told the dispatcher what we had found, repeating, Mr. Allen's warning and describing the object. They told us to stay inside immediately and wait for the bomb squad. The word bomb made my skin crawl. It felt surreal, like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. I backed into the house, my hands still shaking so badly I could barely shut the door. From the living room window, I could see Mr. Allen still watching, his phone pressed to his ear, likely speaking to the same dispatcher. For the first time, I understood the seriousness in his voice earlier. He hadn't been paranoid, he had been saving my life. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Ethan and I stayed near the back of the house, as far from the car as possible, waiting for the sound of sirens. My heart wouldn't slow down. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every thought spiraled into what might have happened if I had ignored that call. That was the turning point. In that moment, I knew my morning, and maybe even my entire life, was no longer ordinary. The car I trusted, the driveway I walked across every day, had become a trap, and the only reason I was alive to realize it was because someone cared enough to stop me. The sound of sirens grew louder until flashing red and blue lights filled our street. Within minutes, police cruisers blocked off both ends of the road. Neighbors peeked through their blinds and gathered on porches, their conversations hushed and uneasy. I stood frozen by the window, my heart still racing, my hands clammy. Ethan paced behind me like a caged animal, his phone still in his hand but forgotten. When the first officer approached, Mr. Allen rushed forward from his porch, pointing to my driveway. I couldn't hear his words from inside, but I saw his arms motioning toward the underside of my car. The officer's face shifted from calm professionalism to something more serious. He quickly waved his partner over, then called something into his radio. Moments later, a large black truck pulled up with the words, Bomb Squad, in bold white lettering. The letters hit me like a slap. My knees weakened, and I had to grip the window frame just to steady myself. Two officers knocked at the door, their voices firm but kind. Ma'am, sir, you need to stay inside the house, away from the front windows. We'll let you know when it's safe. I nodded quickly, though my throat was too tight to speak. Ethan managed a stiff, understood, before shutting the door. He looked at me, his usual confident smirk gone. Rachel, this is real. That thing under your car, it's serious. I sank onto the couch, my whole body trembling. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life. Just that morning, I had been sipping coffee, planning my lessons for school. Now, a bomb squad was parked outside my house because someone had planted a device meant to kill me. From the safety of the living room, I watched through the narrow slit of the curtains as the squad approached my car. Dressed in heavy protective gear, one man crouched down slowly with a flashlight. The way he moved calm, cautious, deliberate, made my stomach twist tighter. If he was being that careful, then whatever was under there wasn't just suspicious, it was dangerous. Minutes felt like hours as he worked. He used a small camera on a pole to inspect the device, calling out details I couldn't hear. Another officer wrote notes, their faces grim. Finally, one of them pulled back and shook his head. The squad leader spoke briefly into his radio before turning toward my house. A knock came at the door again. This time, two officers stepped inside. One looked directly at me. Miss Monroe, we need you to remain calm. We've confirmed it is an explosive device. It was rigged in a way that would have likely gone off once the car moved. The words crashed over me like cold water. I felt the blood drain from my face, and the room spun slightly. My legs buckled, and Ethan grabbed my arm, guiding me back to the couch before I collapsed. Are you sure? I whispered, my voice trembling. The officer nodded solemnly. Yes, ma'am. You were very lucky your neighbor noticed. If you had started the engine this morning, his voice trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. The meaning was clear. I might not be sitting here alive. I pressed my hands over my mouth, tears welling in my eyes. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. Ethan wrapped an arm around my shoulders, silent but steady. For once, he didn't have a joke or a smirk. He just held me. Mr. Allen was brought inside a few minutes later, He looked at me with eyes filled with worry. Rachel, he said softly, I know it was terrifying hearing me shout at you, but thank God you listened. If you had turned that key, his voice broke, and he stopped himself. I stood and hugged him tightly, my tears spilling freely. You saved my life, I whispered. I'll never forget this, never. Outside, the squad carefully removed the device from my car and carried it away in a secure container. The sight made my stomach churn all over again. Something so small, strapped to the bottom of my everyday car, had the power to take everything away in an instant. As the officers packed up, one of them gave us a final update. We're still investigating. It's possible this was random, but given how it was placed, it looks intentional. We'll need to ask you some questions. Intentional. That word echoed in my head long after he left. Someone had targeted me. It wasn't just bad luck or coincidence. Someone had planned this. The thought made my hands shake all over again. The chaos outside eventually died down, the flashing lights fading as trucks rolled away. But inside, the silence was deafening. I sat with Ethan and Mr. Allen, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me. I kept picturing myself walking out casually, turning the key in the ignition, and never making it to work or anywhere ever again. That was the moment the reality hit with full force. My life had almost ended in my own driveway, and the only reason I was still here was because someone cared enough to watch closely, to speak up, and to insist I listen even when I doubted him. When the last police cruiser pulled away and the flashing lights finally disappeared from our street, the silence felt heavier than the chaos had. I sat on the couch, staring at the window, my mind refusing to process what had just happened. Hours earlier, it had been a normal morning. Now, my car was a crime scene, and I couldn't shake the thought that I had been seconds away from not being here at all. Ethan brought me a glass of water and sat beside me without saying anything at first. His usual sarcasm and jokes were gone. He just looked at me with a mix of guilt and relief. Finally, he spoke. I shouldn't have brushed it off. I should have believed Allen right away. I shook my head, my voice soft but firm. You couldn't have known. None of us could have. I almost ignored him too. The truth was, part of me still wanted to believe it had all been a mistake, some sort of misunderstanding, but the image of that metallic device, strapped under my car, was burned into my memory. It wasn't a raccoon or a loose car part. It was real, and it was deliberate. Later that day, my mom came rushing over after hearing what happened. She nearly collapsed into me, her arms tight around my shoulders, tears running down her cheeks. Rachel, if you had gotten in that car, she couldn't even finish the sentence. Her voice broke, and she just held me tighter. I hugged her back, trying to be strong, but inside, I felt like a child again, scared, vulnerable, desperate for someone else to protect me. My mom whispered, "Promise me you'll be more careful. Promise me you'll always listen when something feels off." That promise weighed heavy, but I knew she was right. The rest of the week was a blur of detectives, questions, and restless nights. The police confirmed the device was an explosive, though they were still investigating who placed it and why. Their theory was that it could have been part of a string of incidents in the area, but hearing that didn't ease my fear. If anything, it made me feel more exposed, like I had a target painted on me. I found myself double-checking every lock in the house at night, pulling the curtains closed tight, and jumping at the smallest noises. Sleep didn't come easily. Each time I drifted off, I jolted awake with the image of turning my car key and everything going black. But there was also something else: gratitude. I couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Allen. My neighbor had paid attention, noticed something I never would have, and cared enough to call me even when he knew I might think he was being dramatic. He risked sounding paranoid just to keep me safe. A few days later, I walked across the street with a basket of homemade cookies and knocked on his door. When he opened it, his tired eyes softened. "Rachel," he said with a small smile, "how are you holding up?" I set the basket down and hugged him before answering. "I don't even know how to thank you. If you hadn't called me," my voice cracked, and I had to pause before continuing. "You saved my life." He patted my shoulder gently. "I just did what anyone should do, look out for their neighbor." But I knew it was more than that. He had trusted his instincts and acted, even when it might have been easier to ignore what he saw. That choice had made all the difference. In the weeks that followed, I began to feel a shift inside myself. Yes, I was still anxious, still checking under my car more times than I'd admit. But I also realized how fragile life is and how quickly everything can change. I stopped brushing off small warnings. I stopped assuming I was too safe, too ordinary, for something bad to happen. And I started appreciating the people who cared enough to speak up, even if their warnings made me uncomfortable. One evening, sitting with Ethan on the porch, he admitted quietly, "You know, I used to think you were too cautious, but now I see it's better to be safe than sorry. Alan saved you, but you saved yourself too by listening. I won't make fun of you again for being careful." I smiled faintly, the first real smile I'd managed since the incident. Maybe being cautious isn't so bad after all. Looking back now, that morning changed me forever. I realized that danger doesn't always announce itself loudly. It hides in plain sight, waiting for you to ignore it. And sometimes, survival depends on listening, not just to your own instincts, but to the people who care enough to warn you. If there's one lesson I'll never forget, it's this. Trust the warning, even if it sounds strange. It might just save your life. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.